Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is Kid Nate of BloodyElbow.com, joined by Dallas Winston. We're going to be doing previews and predictions for UFC on Fox 6 and Bellator 86. One caveat I want to mention, these are a supplement to Dallas's in-depth dissections of all the UFC fights and our Bellator previews by Fraser Coffeen. So this is not replacing, this is just supplementing, and as always, the Bloody Elbow staff will have their official predictions in a written post. So if you're too lazy for video, you're not even watching this, so why am I talking to you now? I don't know. Dallas, how you doing?
Cold, but I'm well.
Cold?
Cold, sleepy.
Summer's here in Austin, Texas. It's in the 60s and 70s and delightful. Our 2 weeks of winter, I think, are officially over. So
That's sweet, man. Kiss my ass.
Yep.
-2 here this morning.
We'll talk to you in August when it's 9,000 degrees. All right, Bellator 86 coming up tonight. Big event. We're just going to talk about the main card. Well, let's touch a little bit on the welterweight tournament because we've got Bloody Elbow member Ben Saunders is fighting in his. Is this his third Bellator tournament?
I thought, didn't they shift this up to the main card?
You are correct. I believe that they did. Yep, it is on the main card. It is
I think
on the main card.
when
Never mind, never
Bellator
mind.
first came out with the new switch to Spike, initially they only had 3 fights slated for the main broadcast, but I think since then they started to add 4 because 2 hours should be plenty of time for 4 fights.
One would hope. One would hope. So who you got in this? Ben Saunders. This is his third Bellator tournament, fighting Kofi Adzitso. Not somebody I'm intimately familiar with, I have to admit.
No, Kofi's. I mean, Saunders for sure. It would take. Someone to have really, really strong hopes for Kofi Adzitso to be a star. He might have the potential to be. He trains under Jeremy Horn. He started out as a wrestler. He's a real super raw guy, new to the game. So I think he might build himself into something as he grows and matures a little bit. But I mean, not only does Saunders have a stellar skill set, both with his Thai game and his jiu-jitsu is really underrated, but his length just pays so many dividends in every area for him. On the feet with his range, especially in the Thai clinch. I mean, he's got that height, and when he gets that Thai plum, the knees are going to follow. And I love his jiu-jitsu game. His jits is really smooth. So I'm going to go Saunders on this, but I'm interested to see if Adzitso comes out and shows that he might have something in the tank for the future. I lost your audio there, son.
Good point. I had my mute button on because the wind was blowing. Now I'm back. Sorry about that. I got to go with Ben here. Again, I don't know anything about coffee, but I think Ben is pretty set to make at least the semifinals of these tournaments. I think that's kind of a given. I'd like to see him make a title run, and he might be able to do it this time. We got Merius, Romps, and Brent Weedman in one of the other quarterfinals. What are your thoughts on that one?
I'm kind of down on the white mare lately. I don't want to say I was super high on him, but obviously when he head kicked his way through the whole Dream tournament, I mean, that was defining, to say the least. Since he's been over in Bellator, he seems like a little guy. He really struggles with distance a little bit in the past few guys that he's scrapped with, and he gets touched a lot. He's been wobbled, rocked, or he's definitely been hittable in his last few. Weedman's kind of a lurking guy that has impressed me quite a bit. Real hard nose, although I do want to say I thought Thiago Michel, who's a real solid Brazilian. He's a Waco kickboxing champion. Young guy, but he came over and gave him a great fight. I kind of thought he should have won that fight. I did appreciate that Weedman gave him a ton of respect afterwards because I think he knew that it was a razor-thin fight. But Weedman's a tough guy. I think I'm going to go with Weedman here just by being a little bit more durable than Zaromskis.
Yeah, I got to go with Weedman here too. I think Zaromkis is somebody who just suffers fighting in the cage and fighting against bigger wrestling-based fighters, and I think Weedman fits that mold, and I think he's going to get a decision win. Now it brings us to Douglas Lima and Mikael Sarov in another quarterfinal welterweight tournament fight. Who you got in this one?
Well, I'm going to go with Lima. I think it's kind of interesting Bellator, from a certain echelon of the fan base gets, they're always going to have that the UFC washout, second rate, and all that crap. But if you look at a guy like Saunders, who was once pretty close to, he was in title contention, and ended up losing to Swick, I believe. But he's not dominated over in the Bellator tournament like a lot of people would assume if all that second rate bullshit was true. And Lima's a good example of a guy that's, explosively offensive. He's a gamer, really hard nosed. Sarov, Bellator's got a whole legion of like guys that could be Russian superstars in the future. Most of the guys out of Shlemenko's team. Sarov is not one of the top guys that I've been impressed with. He lost to Lyman Good. No shame in that, obviously. But I'm going to go Lima. I think he's definitely one of the favorites to win the tournament.
Yeah, I got to go with you here. I like Zarov's nickname, the Lonely Wolf.
Not the lone. He's not just alone. He's lonely.
Lonely, exactly. But I just, when I watched him against Good, I feel like he's a guy who could cut down to lightweight and benefit from the cut. I think he's given up a lot of strength and power, and I like Lima in this one.
You think Lyman Good could cut? That dude is a house.
Yeah,
Lyman
I think Sarov could cut down. Yes,
I agree. Yeah,
he looked a division fully underneath Good.
I would agree.
Size, that the other welterweight tournament card that's going to be on the undercard, which is streaming on Spike TV, Spike.com,
and Bloody Elbow,
and on Bloody Elbow, will be carrying it. Raul Amaya and Jose Gomez. Any thoughts on that one? You think these guys are dark horses to go all the way and win the tournament, upset Saunders, Lima?
No.
Weedman?
Amaya, I believe, fought Saunders and got shellacked pretty bad, but tough dude. I thought he showed a unbelievable heart in that fight. So I don't know a lot about Gomez, but I'm going to go with Amaya on that one. Yeah,
I'll go with you on that. And that brings us to Muhammad Kingmo Lowell's Bellator debut against Primislav Miazla. Not too bad on the pronunciation there. You got an improvement on how to say the dude's name?
I think it's Misiala, but hell if I know. It's kind of a bitch reading words all the time and saying them in your head and then having to speak them out loud so everyone could laugh at you. But I'll go with Misiala for the pronunciation, but I'll definitely be going with King Mo for the pick. I think he's, this is a bit of a softball for King Mo. The guy's, again, he's okay, but I think he's coming off a loss in Bama, first round knockout loss or a definitive loss in Bama. And, from looking through his record in the past fights I've seen, sure, decent guy to throw in the mix, but I think King Mo is going to wreck him.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a showcase fight for King Mo. I have a little bit of a bad feeling that King Mo's not going to win the tournament, but I don't think this is going to be the fight where it happens. And that's not based on any objective or thoughtful analysis. That's just a feeling I have. When I saw that preview, doing a whole fight preview on one fighter who's entering a tournament, it's just like, that just, to me, begs bad luck to come a call and screw up everything you're trying to build. But
who do you see beating him?
I don't. That's the thing. Objectively, on paper, King Mo strolls through this tournament, strolls to the top of the Bellator light heavyweight division and destroys everyone in his path. I just have a feeling that when you hype a guy that heavily and you have so many eggs in that basket that something's going to go wrong. This is MMA after all.
Hopefully they got that out of the way with Zayat's crushing Babalu. Holy shit, did I underrate that dude?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of Babalu not being Babalu anymore, and it's probably time for him to retire before he gets his brain scrambled anymore. It was not fun to watch for me. That was a tough one for somebody who remembers the Babalu of old, the guy who won the 1999 King of Kings, or came in second in the King of Kings tournament and beat Shogun Hua.
Yep.
At the time when nobody had beaten Shogun, Babalu completely dismantled him in 2003. So, it is what it is. It's time to move on, Babalu. I hope you've got some cush martial arts instruction gigs lined up for you and plenty of seminars to teach and so forth.
He started out as a wrestler and a lucha libre and BJJ guy, and I think Rogan always touted him as a Thai champion, but I always thought that was weird because he never seemed comfortable on the feet. His game was wrestling. With a little submission grappling mixed in, and he's totally gotten away from that.
A lot of submission grappling, and his kickboxing moves seemed to be limited to a leg kick in which he dropped his hands and was just ripe for a counter, as Chuck Claudel showed us many times. And so that brings us to the welterweight title fight, Ben Askren versus Carl Amasu. I got to say, this looks like another 5-round lay and pray fest. Not lay and pray, but mad scrambles with the net effect of being basically lay and pray. I love to watch Askren, but most people don't. I mean, the thing about Askren is he can be in any position and get a takedown, literally sitting flat on his ass with both feet out like that and get a takedown from an ankle pick. I mean, the guy can do amazing things as a grappler. I just wish he would go for submissions and take some chances and get the finish, but I don't think Amasu is the guy that's going to break up the Ben Askren party.
A couple comments. In the first, I'm not saying that this is going to have you on the edge of your seat for an Askren fight, but I'm trying to think of which one of the BE guys did it. I want to say it was maybe KJ and maybe Riordan kind of chimed in on some of that, but it was about how it was a judo chop on how Askren chains his takedown attempts together. And you know, that was one of those where I totally, for some reason, I was fascinated by it. Which, I mean, I kind of like that, not to toot our own horn, but I do like that about really diving into the deep technical stuff, because you learn shit that you have no idea. You know, you would watch that and think, well, he's trying to get a takedown. But the way that they, once again, I'm just keeping you on the Askren, you're going to call me. Thanks. So after I read that, I've looked at the way Askren fights in a whole new way, and for as, we'll say, cautious as he is on the ground, he a risk taker. He's a madman with the way he goes for takedowns, because he pretty much launches for something kind of sloppy. I mean, technically it's all sound, but the timing isn't there. Maybe it's not the right environment, but he will throw himself in some back-asswards position and then just constantly work from there, hit new angles, switch from singles to doubles. So I'm not going to say that people are going to be, jumping out of their chair watching it, but that for me, I guess, gave me a little more interest in watching him fight. I really appreciate how he has dove into his jiu-jitsu game to complement his wrestling. It's allowed him, I mean, it's made him positionally almost unstoppable. I mean, I think everyone agrees they'd like to see a few more submission attempts from the top, but Ben doesn't give a fuck. He'll lay on the dude and taunt people for not liking it afterwards. So Amasu, I know that there's been a lot of bigger names that have tried to take a run at Askren and failed, although some of them have done pretty well. There is maybe something about Amasu that I'm a little bit interested in, because he's coming down. He's a big bastard, strong as hell, but he's explosive. He's a mean son of a bitch. I mean, this dude, when he's in the cage, he's vicious. And his striking is really solid, and he has hit a couple sweet sweeps in almost all of his Bellator fights. If he gets put on his back, he's hit some electric sweeps and then gone into mount and just pummeled the hell out of people. So I'm not going to get overboard and say he's going to upset him, but I think he's got a lot better chance than a lot of people think, between his strength, his vicious striking, and a really technical grappling game. So we'll see.
Yeah, he's got some submissions, including some heel hook wins and leg attacks, and so that might be something Askren hasn't seen that much, and maybe it'll catch him by surprise. But I just think anytime you roll to your back against Askren, you're just inviting him to roll on top of you. I mean, the dude is funky wrestling. It is what it is. The guy can get a takedown from any position. He will take insane risks to get a takedown, and just puts it into his world, which is fighting for takedowns. I really would love to see him go for more submissions and go for the finish. I think that could make him a much more exciting fighter. But again, it's risky, and he's got something to lose without Bellator welterweight straps. So, well, let's move on to the UFC on Fox 6 card. Johnson versus Dodson, the flyweights headlining the card. But let's go all the way through this undercard, which will be airing on FX and Facebook. First up, Rafael Natal versus Shawn Spencer. What do you think about these middleweights? I
believe the first Facebook just has one fight, and that's Simeon Thoresen versus David Mitchell.
You're correct.
That's the lone Facebook bout. So,
well, let's start with that one then. Mitchell and Thoresen, welterweights. What do you think?
For a fight that really no one cares about, I'm somewhat intrigued in this. Thoresen is, I don't want to say a grappling prodigy, but he's a grappling-based guy under Joachim Hansen, or whatever, Hellboy out of the Pride heyday. The interesting thing is that he's medium tall for welterweight, but his reach is phenomenal. I think it's 79 inches, just under 80 inches. Mitchell, to me, he and T.J. Waldberger, was it Waldberger or Grant? Him and one of the TJs in Mitchell's debut set the record for the most submission attempts in Octagon history. So it was a really entertaining back and forth scramble fest. After that, in his fight, he lost that fight by decision, and then he fought Paulo Thiago in Brazil after that. And even though he was pretty much dominated, Thiago did not want to go to the ground with him whatsoever, and I thought Mitchell showed a hell of a chin and a lot of heart. I mean, he took a thorough beating in that fight. But I think maybe Thorson's a little more well-rounded. I think his range, neither of their striking games are really spectacular, but I think Thorson's reach is going to help him out a little bit there. And I'm thinking they're going to, because he's a little more well-rounded, that it's going to kind of be whittled down into Mitchell being a little bit of a one-dimensional fighter. So I'm kind of leaning Thorson, although who knows, Mitchell, this could be one of those fights where when we get on the ground, Mitchell is going to show that he's an A-level grappler if he can get it there. Hesitant pick for Thorson by decision.
Yeah, it's you're down at the depths of the UFC roster for this fight, and I think you're right. I think Mitchell is pretty limited. Seth Baczynski showed that Thorson can be muscled and just wore him down and beat him down, and I don't see Mitchell as being physically imposing enough to overcome what I see as a slight skill advantage on Thorson's part. So I'll echo your pick for Hellboy's protege. And then now we can talk about the middleweights, Hafjell, Natal, and Shawn Spencer. This is a fight I'm so eager to get to that I cut in line to talk about it. It's going to be the first fight on the FX prelim cards. What are your thoughts on this one?
Natal, for sure. I think he's really done shockingly moved his striking up a few levels. I think he had the idea before mentally. He's pretty creative. He threw a lot of spinning back fists, but would just go way off balance, and it was pretty wild. But in the past couple of fights, he's cleaned it up, tightened it up really well, and I think he's also improved on his wrestling. Of course, he's one of the jiu-jitsu coaches at Renzo Gracie's school in New York. So I haven't really seen anything from Spencer, both fight-wise and background-wise, that would make me confident enough to take him over to Natal. So I'll go Sapo, probably by a finish, submission, we'll say.
Yeah, I really can't argue with that. I'm not seeing anything. I watched one of Spencer's fights I found on YouTube, and not overly impressed. He's going to be making his UFC debut, octagon jitters, et cetera, et cetera. So I gotta go with Sapo here too. The UFC veteran should take it. I'm afraid it's going to go to decision though. That's my I feel, and that'll bring us to the heavyweights. What I'm hoping will be a slop bucket of brawl. Mike Russo, the Chicago cop who famously knocked out Todd Duffy, against Shawn Jordan, Strikeforce import. Who you got in this one?
I think both this fight and the next one above it, Bader, which is Bader versus Vladi, I think they're kind of both of a case of very similar fighters. One of the pair of each, younger, a little more athletic, still learning the game, and the other one more of the old lion experience, maybe not so fleet of foot, but still really calculating. And this is interesting because I was actually pretty high on Shawn Jordan. He key locked LeVar Johnson, which because Johnson came in and curb stomped everybody in the UFC right off the bat. So I thought that was pretty impressive. For a big guy who's not even really that cut, he moves, amazingly for such a big, stocky guy. So it's going to be his athleticism. I kind of like his boxing game. He's shown, I think Jordan overall has shown shades of brilliance. They haven't been that common, but under the tutelage of Greg Jackson, for a while I was super high on him. I thought he could become a force. His last fight against Congo, I thought he kind of looked a little bit lost, and I think he hasn't quite found his identity as a fighter yet. So I think it's going to be a mental game. Russo, of course, he's either kind of fought A-, B+ guys and won, or, he lost to a couple of the real big shooters he fought, Verdum and Karatanov. So I'm actually going to go with Russo on this one because I think that mental edge, both intelligence, confidence, and toughness, is going to overcome Jordan's youthful exuberance in this one. I don't really like that pick because I'd like to see Jordan do well, but I think that's going to be the difference, the mental game.
Yeah, I don't like picking Russo here, mostly because of the nearly decade age difference. Russo's 36 years old. Took him a long time to get to the UFC. I think his wrestling fighting style kept them away from him for a long time, at the risk of having an overweight, tubby, boring wrestler in the division, which they didn't want to have. But I think he's certainly delivered the action. I mean, his wins over Todd Duffy and John Madsen showed that he can send the young boys home in tears. And then Verdum schooled him though, and so it'll be interesting to see how Russo comes back from that just crushing defeat against Verdum. But I don't know. It's tough. I want Jordan to win because he's younger. I think he's got more upside long term. But Russo is a big, ugly, immovable block, and I think he's going to dominate the takedowns from the clinch, and I think he's going to get a decision. I don't think there's much Jordan can do about that. I hope I'm wrong, but we'll see. And that brings us to the second fight in the pair of fights you were talking about: Ryan Bader versus Vladimir Matyushenko. Another case, Matyushenko is literally as old as the hills. He's been fighting MMA at high level for well over a decade now. Wrestler.
He's 42.
Yeah, 42 years old. We've seen him in there getting murked against John Jones. His loss to Alexander Gustafsson. Couple of wins in his UFC run, but against Jason Brills and Alexander Ferreira. Kakariko, is that his nickname? What's the dude's? Yeah. And those are anything but elite UFC light heavyweights. So I kind of got to go with Bader here. I think Bader. They're very similar. I think in his heyday, Matyushenko probably was, or is definitely the better wrestler. Just a matter of international wrestling competition being a step above American collegiate wrestling. But Ryan Bader's very athletic. He's very strong. He's got a solid punch. It should be his fight to lose. What do you think?
I totally agree. They're kind of real similar, like you said. Bader's going to be way more mobile. I think Vladdy's coming off an Achilles tendon injury too, which that is definitely not going to help his movement, and he's already going to be struggling there. But it is one of those fights where both of these guys throw really, really hard. So when you have fist flying like that, Bader's got his chin touched in his last several fights. So I don't think you could ever discount Vladdy here. I would also say Bader likes a little more like the wide looping hooks. He'll throw in a jab and maybe a right cross, a straight one in there. But Vladdy does snap out his punches pretty straight, and I think he might have a little more snap on a little more precise whip on his punches, where I think Bader has equal power, but the fact that he's a lot of times coming in loose and wide, both of these guys have improved their striking offensively a lot, but their defense really is porous. So the one thing I give Bader credit for, I think he's got excellent game planning. I think the Rampage fight was a real good example of that. That's different than fight IQ, because a lot of times I'm not promoting his live time decision making, as elements come at him, but I think he goes into the fight with a strong mental game, a real sensible game plan, and I think that in his youth is going to probably get him a finish here. I'll call maybe second round TKO.
Wow, bold words. I think it'll be a decision, but I think that Bader does have a live chance to knock out Vladdy. Just depends how much Vladdy's chin has atrophied over the years and after all the head trauma he's absorbed in his MMA career. And for the record, 10 years ago, Vladdy would have killed this kid.
I agree.
Not even close. But that was a long time ago, and Bader is on his way up. That brings us to a welterweight fight between two extremely unheralded welterweights. Mike Stump, who I wanted to say was making his UFC debut, but he has actually been submitted by TJ Waldberger at UFC Fight Night 25, Battle on the Bayou. So he's a UFC veteran fighting Pascal Kraus, who's also who's 1-1 in the UFC. Lost to John Hathaway in a decision that was anything but a thrilling bout. And he's got a win over Mark Scanlon. So you got a guy that's 0-1 in the UFC against a guy that's 1-1 in the UFC. Who you got in this one?
Stump is a Team Kern guy, I think wrestling background. I believe he's only like a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and his striking is decent to average. Kraus, though, if you remember, he came into the UFC undefeated at 9 or 10-0 and was really, really hyped up. And he, even though Scanlon's not a big name, he handily defeated him by decision. He has just been plagued with injuries since then. I want to say that was somewhere in mid to late 2010. And since then, he's only taken one fight, which was the Hathaway fight, which, I mean, that's a really tough opponent to face. But originally, this cat came in with a lot of well-deserved hype. He's a young kid, started out, I believe, as a judoka, or no, I'm sorry, as a boxer, then added some judo, and then just started rounding everything out. And he trains part-time with Duke Rufus at Rufus Sport now. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on him to kind of, figure it out. Are you going to be someone we can get behind and tout as a prospect or not? He has that potential. Who knows how his injuries are going to affect him, but I think he should be the favorite here, and he'll be my pick, probably by decision.
I'm tempted to go that way. I like to see a German fighter make a splash, but I just think stylistically that Stump's wrestling could be a big problem for Kraus. And I'm always skeptical of guys that have come up on the European circuit. Whenever Smoogie or Leland or anybody starts raving about somebody tough on the European circuit, I'm like, yeah, let's see him do against an American wrestler, and then we'll talk. But man, it's a hard one to call. I think I'm going to go with Stump here. I think I like the PF ending to his last name, and I think that's going to be a lucky charm for me. And the Pascal Kraus is going to go home in sadness. That's my pick. That brings us to featherweights. Clay Guida versus Hatsu Hioki. Guida's making his move down to featherweight. Long awaited. He's been one of the smallest guys in the UFC lightweight division for a long time, and done very well in that division. One of the staples, fan favorite, up and down career. He's coming down to featherweight, bound and determined to make a title run. Hioki's a guy who came in heavily hyped from Japan, probably one of the best Japanese talents that's been brought into the UFC in the past decade, maybe. Yeah, I'd say one of the best. Won a couple, but then lost his last decision. Who you got? Both of these guys. Guida lost an ugly decision to Gray Maynard that cost him a lot of credibility with fans, had people booing him and saying that Greg Jackson had ruined his go-for-broke fighting style. What do you think about this one?
It's a really tough one. Hioki is one of the guys that actually came over hyped, but in his prime. Almost all the other guys were on a slide, had lost kind of the buzz, but they brought Hatsu over in his prime, which I really liked. There's a couple. He lacks the sense of urgency when he needs it. He lacks the killer instinct. He's really tall and long. His striking used to be not the best, but his striking has gotten a lot better. He'll reel off high kicks. He's not much of a puncher, but his length really helps, make what's probably average to mediocre stand up a little bit better. His judo in the clinch is sick. I can't think of a featherweight grappler that I think is better than him, or that I would pick to out-grapple. That doesn't count wrestling, but he's probably one of the most phenomenally technical grapplers at featherweight, probably the most. So the big question is going to be, his concerning points about mentality and aggression is exactly where Guida thrives. Before maybe Hatsu lost to Lamas, I probably would have called this a tailor-made matchup for him. And I don't think Guida can fuck around with him on the ground whatsoever. I think Hioki will sweep him quickly if he engages. But I think the key for Clay's a tough guy because he can wrestle, and it's his movement and his enthusiasm. Really, those are his best assets. So there's not a lot of finishing power there. So what he tried to do against Gray, by using those traits, to get in and out without standing right in front of him, I think he's going to have to do that same thing with Hioki. If he takes him down, he's going to have to use that as a means to score control points, but he's going to have to keep his posture and not let Hioki close his guard or control his posture, because I think he's in big, big trouble after that. It's not like the one time he sits down and engages him on the mat, he's going to get finished or swept. But if he does it for any prolonged periods of time, I think Hioki will really go to town with him on that. But of course, the mentality part that dictates everything. Hioki's complacence, I think, might be appeased actually by Guida being so overly aggressive. Anyways, I'm going to take Hioki in this one. I haven't kind of lost faith in him. Guida is going to have to execute a very careful and perfect strategy. His Hioki's length on the feet, I think, is going to bother Guida's energy and enthusiasm, and um, Guida's dropping levels for low singles and doubles might be a problem. But Hioki's solid in the clinch, real savvy and experienced, and I think he's incrementally better on the ground. So I'm going to go with Hioki. I think he'll sub him.
Risky call. I don't know. I think Guida's going to be able to control him on the ground. I think Hioki's somebody who's better from top control than he is from the bottom game. I don't think he's going to get any takedowns on Guida. I think that Guida might even have the ability to keep this fight completely standing the whole time, in which case fans are in for a shit show because it's not going to be much fun. But Guida will be dancing, shucking and jiving, as he's shown us recently, coming in for punches, trying to avoid Hioki's kicks. But I don't think Hioki can knock him out. I don't think Hioki can get the takedown. I think Guida with Jackson behind him is going to take the safe bet and keep this fight on the feet. And then from there, it's going to be a coin toss. I think judges like punches better than kicks. So I'm going to go with Guida by decision in what I'm predicting to be a shit show. I think that Guida is going to completely ruin his reputation with the fans before.
I don't think Guida's good enough to beat him on the feet. You know what I mean? I don't think Clay's he's made great improvements, but I don't think he's at a point where he can say, well, hell, I'll just sprawl and brawl this guy and take him. I mean, he probably has an advantage there. Hioki's never been finished, never been knocked out. His chin is invincible, and I think his length is going to cause Clay some problems. So how about we make a little friendly bet that I bet you Guida will not be able to engage Hioki on the ground for prolonged periods of time without getting fucked up. Friendly.
And what are we betting?
Oh, I don't know.
Let's see.
I didn't get that far.
Money
is
something.
I'll
take your bet.
Something self-humiliating, maybe, other than
Yeah. We'll see. I'll take your bet. I think Hioki is too complacent, too slow, and too limited. I don't think he's got the wrestling to contend with Guida, and he doesn't have a plan B.
Maybe our 12 faithful followers that watch us live can decide what the bet.
Yeah. Post a comment if you're watching
reward.
this live, and let us know what you want us to bet on this Guida versus Hioki wager. But this brings us to the final prelim card on the FX section of the fight card. Lightweights, TJ Grant versus Matt Wiman. This is one I'm looking forward to because TJ Grant has looked like a beast at lightweight ever since coming down from welterweight. The guy is an extremely skilled wrestler, grappler, and Matt Wiman, kind of a jack of all trades, tough as hell, veteran of the fifth season of Ultimate Fighter that basically stalked the UFC's lightweight division. He's been a fixture. He's sent a lot of guys home that thought they were the next big thing. And Matt Wiman is tough as hell and pretty well-rounded. But I think TJ Grant's just too good on the ground. I think we're going to see a submission here. What do you got?
I've been saying forever that Wyman's criminally underrated, and I'll still say it. I'll remove the criminally part because he is getting some respect. I mean, after he tangled with Paul Sass, and Sass went to work on him. He was successful with everything but the finish, and I thought Wiman showed excellent intelligence and technique to not only persevere and stay calm enough to get through all that, but then to turn around and finish Sass.
Yeah, that was pretty hot.
It was amazing, and really Wiman to me fights like a little guy. It always shocks me that he's like 5'10" because he fights almost like a Chad Mendes, just a small little mean, one of the scrappiest bastards in all of MMA, I'd say right now. I thought I don't want to say he got jobbed. There's a good case that he could have won both the Stout and the Siver fights, and if you take that off, this dude is one of the top contenders by far. So by that measurement, I don't think he still gets the due for how tough and how legit he is. I agree with you on Grant. Since he's made a couple trips to Thailand, his striking has looked nasty, and now that he's dropped down, his length and his range, just all of a sudden the dude can fight on the feet. So I think Wiman doesn't have the power to finish Grant. I do think Grant can possibly finish Wiman on the mat. But I hate to do MMA math, but I look at if Wiman totally took on Paul Sass, who for a while, Rogan stopped using the Aoki reference as the standard for stellar grappling and started to put Paul Sass in there. So I would put Grant at about the same level as Sass. He's long, he's super dynamic and creative off his back. but he's going to be more of a force because he's experienced, he's a better wrestler, and his striking is much better too.
Yeah.
So I would pick Wiman over 95% of the lightweights right now, but Grant is a really, really tough matchup for him. With that disclaimer, I'm still going to go Wiman by decision.
Wow, going with Wiman in this one. I
Yep.
can't do that. I think the difference between Paul Sass and TJ Grant is wrestling. And I don't think that, I think Sass's grappling is probably a little slicker than Grant's, but I think Grant's wrestling gives him control that Sass just does not have. You're not going to see him going for crazy arm bars off his back or anything that's going to give up position, but you will see a lot of submission attempts from the top, arm triangles, front chokes, Bravo chokes, Stars chokes, that kind of stuff. And I think that the combination of the physicality and the size advantage, he's going to be coming in stronger and heavier than Wiman. I think is going to combine that with the wrestling dominance. Wrestling's probably the weakest part of Wyman's game, although he's improved it, dramatically in his years in the UFC. But I got to go with Grant here. I think that Grant is the real deal, and you want to talk underrated. Both of these guys are kind of dark stars, but I would say TJ Grant has flown under the radar even more so than Wiman. Wyman's the reality show veteran, et cetera, et cetera. But TJ Grant's somebody that's been in the UFC for 3 years, only had 3 losses, had about 6 wins, and failed to get any attention. I think that's about to change. I think he's gonna get a tap out of him at Wiman.
He was a face in the crowd until he dropped down. He's a guy that the drop down made brilliant sense for him. So I agree with that. But I would definitely argue, I think Wiman was a wrestler at heart. That's his foundation. He started to add submissions to that, and now his boxing isn't spectacular, but it's tight and clean. So, but Grant's size. So I think actually Wyman's a better wrestler. He's more technical for sure.
You think he's a better wrestler than Grant?
I do, but how technical-wise, but Grant's close, but I think his size, he is not only is he big, he is long and lanky. So that might make it even, but I can tell you Wiman does not want to be on his back against Grant whatsoever. And Wiman in the past has had some sick sweeps from like Spider Guard and Butterfly. I think he did that to Danzig, or he loves to drop back for a guillotine and roll over into full mount. I don't know if he's going to be able to have that out against Grant. So I'll still pick him though.
I don't think he'll do it. Yeah, you're right about Wiman being a wrestler. I think the thing with Wiman is he gets a little sloppy in his striking, and that costs him in his takedown defense. So you can forget, like I did, that he comes from a wrestling background. And this brings us to the main card. Featherweights Eric Koch and Ricardo Lamas getting some Fox love. What do you think about this one? Koch's got a pretty dramatic tan that he got in a tanning bed that makes him look like a carrot. I don't know if you've seen the pre-fight interviews he's been doing, but the human carrot is going to be fighting Ricardo Lamas here. Who you got?
So now I have to add this, that when we get to the main card at this point of the week, I haven't done the dissections for all these yet, so I haven't done the hours of research and all that. So these are more off the cuff and, of course, subject to change. My first inclination here is actually Lamas, just because Koch is wildly talented. I love his jiu-jitsu and his striking because it's just volatile. It's real creative. It's fun to watch. And his length, I think he's going to have a pretty good height and reach advantage on Lamas. Lamas to me strikes me just as a little tank, like a little pit bull. He's just mean as hell. He's pretty three-dimensional. He can throw hands. He's thrown some capoeira kicks. His submission defense has been phenomenal. So I think that and Koch has been off. He has been, I don't know what his injuries or what, but he can't seem to find a foothold and get consistent and competitive. He was supposed to fight for the title a while back, and so I still have high hopes for him, but I think Lamas is on a roll right now. I think his momentum and his confidence right now, I think this is going to be close, but I think Lamas is going to be able to eke out a decision here.
Bold call. I like it, though, because, Lamas is somebody who moved up from bantamweight when he came into the UFC from the WEC, kind of an unusual move you don't see a lot, and he's really done well. I think maybe he was cutting too much weight and it was sapping his strength because, he's reeled off 3 wins, Matt Grice, Cub Swanson, and Hatsu Hiyoki. Pretty impressive wins, especially the Hiyoki win. Plus he finished Matt Grice with a head kick that was beautiful and submitted Cub Swanson. So we're seeing a guy who can do it all in Lamas. And I think you're right. I think Koch, his injuries, he's only 24 years old, but he's he didn't fight at all in 2012, and so he's going to be rusty. He's going to be coming off some injuries, and we'll see. At that age, being out for a whole year with injuries can play havoc on your mind, and I think Lamas is in a better place. It's a tough one though. Koch is so skilled and so dangerous. He's just kind of a monster. If he were healthy and not rusty, I would definitely pick Koch. And if you hadn't picked Lamas, I probably would have picked Koch too. I'm going to stick with Koch, but I'm going to take that under advisement and definitely be watching for Lamas to surprise. But I think they're definitely hoping that Koch. Either way, I think that they figure the winner of this is getting the Fox exposure and should be a viable title challenger for Jose Aldo or Frankie Edgar in the next featherweight title fight.
Hey, are you sure about Lamas starting out as a bantamweight?
Yeah.
Because he fought Castillo. He was a lightweight, and he ended up dropping down to feather. I see he fought Alcantara, but Alcantara was a feather. But he was a featherweight that just dropped down to bantamweight.
You could be right. Let me see.
Pretty sure he started as a lightweight, lost to Castillo shortly after, dropped down to featherweight, and started just killing cats. I mean, he's been.
You're correct. You're correct. My bad. Erase that analysis. He cut down from lightweight to featherweight. Good Lord, Dallas. Good thing you're here. But
that's why you pay me.
Jump in faster when I start talking shit.
I didn't want to. All right, I will.
Interrupt when I'm stupid because I just went on a long tirade about how unusual that was. Yeah. Anyway, live and learn. That's Dallas is sorry, folks. But next time I make a terrible mistake, it's Dallas's fault. All right, so that brings us to lightweights. Anthony Pettis and Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Pettis, somebody who's been, he beat Ben Henderson for the last WEC title fight, and now Ben Henderson is the UFC champion, and Pettis has been out in the cold. He lost to Clay Guida in his UFC debut. Since then, he's got a split decision against Jeremy Stevens and knocked out Joe Lozon. This is his big shot at a title shot. You think Cowboy can ruin it for him, or you think Pettis is headed for a title fight?
I absolutely think Cowboy can ruin it for him. Again, this is one where my opinion doesn't change drastically, but after I review all the fights, crunch all the numbers or whatever, it could change. But my first inclination as soon as this fight was announced was, damn, close as hell, could go either way, but I'm definitely leaning Cowboy here. I like his length. Neither of them are real powerful wrestlers, but they both have, real complex and dynamic jiu-jitsu games. Cerrone, man, I don't know. He's just impressed me with how tough he is. He's come back from a really disheartening loss, to Nate Diaz. And I don't know, man. He has looked just like a beast, with the whole Gillard thing, coming back and finishing that one. And I mean, he toyed with it was Stevens that he beat recently, right? And I mean, that was never even close. It was just a domination. So I don't want to do the MMA math thing. Another thing I was reading, Mike Hammersmith is a good guy. He writes for MMA Valor. He has a lot of little interesting tidbits, but he also mentioned that Pettis has recently opened a new gym. Not that that's definitely not as monumental as having a PF in his name as far as how the fight's going to turn out, but that's an indicator that he's training down instead of training up with people that will challenge him. That's not huge, but so far there's the little mix of signals I can pick up. I'm leaning Cerrone on this one.
Bold pick. I could see it happening. Cerrone's a little bit taller. He's a little bit meaner too, I think. Pettis is very skilled, incredibly athletic, and very creative. But I think Cerrone's a bit more of a grinder and a bit more of an ugly, nasty fighter. And when he gets mean in the clinch, he's just as mean as anybody in the division. I don't know though. I got to root for Pettis. I got to pick Pettis despite my brain going with Cerrone, because Pettis, I think he's such an exciting fighter. He's so charismatic. When he had the MTV reality show exposure, he got a lot of fans, a lot of attention. The Showtime kick, of course, a classic moment. I just got to hope that Pettis can get past Cerrone, because I think that the lightweight title is his for claiming if Ben Henderson still has it. If Gil Melendez takes it from Henderson, I think that Pettis is going to be shit out of luck. But I think that he's got the right style to beat Ben Henderson again and again, even though it'll be close fights every time. And I don't know. The way that Nate Diaz dismantled Cerrone on the feet, and the way Cerrone failed to adapt to Diaz's game. Pettis' striking game is not as unconventional. as Diaz's. Diaz has the very eccentric slap boxing style, flat-footed boxing. But that seemed to throw Cerrone off, and he couldn't adjust to it. And I think Pettis throws some, with the Capoeira kicks and the Duke Rufus kickboxing background, he's liable to throw some stuff at Cerrone that Cerrone hasn't seen. So I'm gonna go with Pettis to eke out a tough decision in this one. That's
it's kind of interesting. These guys are pretty similar fighters. Cerrone's maybe a little longer and taller, but this is almost like a Muay Thai versus, Pettis has more of a karate taekwondo background. So that's kind of an interesting spin on this one. Based on what you just said, I think they're both good kickers, obviously. Cerrone's got a sweet switch kick, and he can plant that left high kick almost like Pettis does with no setup, just right out of nowhere the leg comes up. I do think that he's a better boxer than Pettis. Pettis is real dynamic. He almost is a little too unconventional, where Cerrone's he is a pure Thai boxer. He's got Thai stance, and I think his boxing game is brutal and rugged enough that that's what's going to throw Pettis off. I don't think the flashy kicks, if they land, it's going to be momentous. The judges, the fans are going to, a little bit of like the Showtime kick syndrome. But I think Cerrone is more functionally equipped than Pettis. That's kind of why I'm leaning his way.
I could definitely see it. The Muay Thai is a more efficient style than the karate taekwondo stuff that Pettis does. However, Pettis will be kicking from a little further out. He'll have a little advantage in the range game because he'll be landing with his feet instead of his foot, where Cerrone's going to be trying to land with the middle of the shin. So if Pettis can capitalize on that range, and I think he has a bit of a speed advantage as well. So,
I think I appreciate you saying that, because that is kind of one of the first thing I think of is, the contact point and the quickness and the range factor. But I think because Cerrone is going to be a little rangier already, that if Pettis is at a point where he can land that kick, it's going to land with the toes or with the foot. And if he's any closer than that, like he's going to kick, a powerful knockout style kick, he's going to be right in range for a Cerrone counter. He's got a real nice right cross and a real nice left hook counter. And clinch-wise, I got to give it to Cerrone there too. I mean, he's a mauler.
Definitely in the clinch. I think Cerrone has
a better wrestler at this point too, don't you think?
Quite possibly. Neither of these guys is known for their wrestling, but yeah, probably better. But Pettis managed to reverse or overcome Ben Henderson's wrestling, and which is not something was something that Cerrone struggled with. So,
I haven't watched that fight in a long time, but I want to say Bendo did not really capitalize on his wrestling and his clinch and his strength in that much. I was actually a little bit down on Bendo because he chose to fight to his opponent's strength. We talked that on one of our past videos, and I think the rematch is going to go different. I think Bendo is going to outmuscle him and really apply his size and strength if they do rematch.
We'll see, and I think Gilbert Melendez is the X factor that can mess everything up for everybody involved. But let's go on to the light heavyweight fight: Rampage Jackson versus Glover Teixeira. Rampage is on his way out. He's been very vocal. This is his last fight with the UFC. He's been very vocally unhappy with the UFC. And Glover Teixeira is a man on his way up. This guy has been waiting forever to get his chance in the UFC. I mean, people have been talking about him as a UFC prospect ever since he had the only win over Sukuju early on in Sukuju's career. So it's been like 5 years. He's 33 years old. He's probably somebody who should have gotten to the UFC when he was 27, 28 instead of 31, 32. But he beat the crap out of Kyle Kingsbury, and he mauled Fabio Maldonado. And so, nobody wanted to fight him. Shogun, who had turned him down, different people turned him down. Jackson, I guess, was at a point where he didn't have any options. They were only offering him this fight. Who you got?
I don't know. My first inclination is that the general consensus on this fight is Glover's a future superstar. He's totally on his way up. Rampage is pissed at the UFC. He doesn't care. He's on his way out. So I think people don't get any farther, and they pick Glover in this one. I want to carefully say that he's a very special fighter. I mean, he's got a perfect blend of like the Chuck Liddell or shoot-to-box style, wild brawling, but he has a lot more technique involved. He doesn't just fling his chin out and wing haymakers. So I think he's got a beautiful, happy medium that he's found there. And of course, I mean, he's a disgusting submission grappler. So that in itself, I mean, the dude has a huge upside. I think he's going to go places. I'm not ready to write him off or write Rampage off as quickly as everybody else seems to be. Glover he doesn't have a lot of top level experience, frankly. Um, Rampage, I can also see him being pissed at the UFC, saying he's going to want more than anything to hand him a big old shit burger and say, here you go, sayonara, thanks for your time. So right now, I think I'm going to take Rampage right now. Again, after I do my whole thing, that might change a little bit, but I think I'm going to take Rampage in this one, even though he has not looked, like the old Rampage. I hate saying that, so cliche, but I'm going to go Rampage. That might be, bold or whatever, but
I think that's an entirely sane call because I think Rampage has a significant boxing advantage. The one thing in Teixeira's favor is he's got a 3-inch reach advantage. He's got very long arms. And he's a couple inches taller than Rampage, but so that'll give him a tiny bit of an edge. But if this fight's in boxing range, Teixeira's in trouble, and Teixeira's a guy who likes to box, and so that's going to force him off his game. And I think he's somebody that's going to be looking to take this fight down, and that's going to be easier said than done against Jackson. Jackson hasn't really been working on his wrestling, but his original foundation was wrestling, and he's still got a mean sprawl and brawl game if he wants to keep the fight on his feet. So I think we'll know very quickly. If Rampage comes in flat, if Rampage gets taken down quickly, if Glover connects on their early exchanges and hurts Rampage, then it's going to be Teixeira's night. But if that doesn't happen, if Rampage gets the better of the first exchange, if Rampage stuffs a couple of takedown attempts, especially if Rampage hurts him with a punch and then stuffs the takedown, Teixeira is going to be in deep shit. And so I'm going to go with Glover just because I like, I'd like to see him make a run at the title, and I always try to go with the future and not the past, and Rampage is definitively the past in this situation, but it's a very scary fight for Glover Teixeira fans, I have to say. If you think this is going to be a walk in the park for him, you might be mistaken.
I agree. I also agree that the first 2 or 3 minutes of this fight are going to really, and that's almost going to be a fight in itself. We're going to be able to tell so much in there. The first thing I'm going to do when I start cracking down this dissection is look at Glover's wrestling, because Rampage has fought some of the best wrestlers in all the way across the board, and I still think, even though he's been taken down, that he has got really excellent, top-notch takedown defense. Phone booth range, he's scary. Rampage with his uppercuts and short hooks, and they're really similar the way they throw hands. They both love the counter left hook, mixing in some uppercuts. Teixeira is like alternating right and left. He'll just stream them out right, left in rapid succession. So his speed, and I think his kind of his swarming ability is something Rampage has to watch out for. But I like Rampage's close quarters power, and his takedown defense, I believe, is going to negate all of Glover's jiu-jitsu accolades. So I'm going to go Rampage here. I'm feeling better about it.
Yeah, I think that's an entirely reasonable call, and I'm nervous now. You got me afraid for Glover. I'm sure Rampage would love to send another John Hackelman fighter out of the octagon on a stretcher like he did Chuck Liddell back in the day. That brings us to the flyweight title fight. First off, I got to say, what are they thinking putting a flyweight title fight immediately after Rampage versus Glover? Fans are going to be seeing these huge behemoths. I think by any measure, Teixeira and Rampage are scary human beings. Anybody sees them on their TV, they go, "Oh my, these are scary guys." You could put Jackson or Teixeira into a A&E prison documentary, and they would quickly be the scariest guy on any cell block. And then you look at John Dodson and Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, and they are not the scariest guy on any cell block. And I think a lot of fans say, "Oh, my girlfriend could beat these guys up." These are little guys. Mighty Mouse is only 5'3", and Dodson might not even be that tall. His official resume says he's 5'3", but I've met Dodson, and
him little.
he's a tiny little dude. However, he's a very powerful dude, and so is Demetrius Johnson, and a lot of speed in the octagon. Probably the two fastest fighters, maybe the two fastest fighters in UFC history meeting in this fight. Who you got?
I would agree with everything you just said wholeheartedly. First off, I think that these two are the quickest and fastest guys in all of MMA. So that alone is a big selling point. There's no question that the lower you go down, and the flyweights are a perfect example. It's just nonstop action. They have no weaknesses. You don't see any one-dimensional flyweights. I mean, it's like watching on fast forward. I know everybody says that, but that's another reason why I used to love to watch Shuto, because they used to, spotlight all the lighter weight fighters, and everyone's well rounded. They'll fight anywhere, and they fight at an unbelievable pace. So I like that they're doing this as the main event. I can't help, man. I'm going to say this every time. I think Dodson is better off at 135. As soon as he dropped down to flyweight, before he was the fastest. I mean, a complete level or two faster than everybody, like fucking running circles around people. As soon as he dropped down to flyweight, all of a sudden it's like, where'd that speed go? And that was so, integral to his game. I think he's going to do better at 135 because he's strong and powerful enough where when people get sick of his striking, they want to take him down, and he's got amazing takedown defense in that speed.
He started out as a wrestler.
Oh yeah, and he's a phenomenal wrestler, but the way that his striking is unstoppable almost at bantamweight. I mean, he was killing people on the feet with the same move.
He demolished TJ Dillashaw, who's done well in the UFC since then.
I want to say he's clubbed everyone that he's knocked out. Has been the same move. When they come in, pivot right, left straight, and he was killing kids with that. So I'm sorry, that was a big long tangent, but based on how his quickness was planed off, it was drowned out when he moved down to flyweight, and I think that Tim Elliott, the dude that he fought, is that who he fought? It was a pretty tough cat. Double check me on that one.
Yeah, he did fight Tim Elliott, but he also fought Jussier Formaga, who for a long time was considered the number one flyweight in the world, and he murked him in the second round.
That's about as close. I said there's no one-dimensional flyweights. Juicy's about as close as you get there. So, but man, I just think DJ Mighty Mouse is not as powerful. I think he's just as quick, but I think that he's much more well-rounded. Once again, if you yawn one more time, I'm gonna.
Sorry, I got a kid that wakes me up in the middle of the night.
I think that Mighty Mouse is gonna kind of weather the storm here. I think that his angles of attack are way more dynamic. I mean, that dude will zigzag in 5 different angles before he even gets in your face and attacks you. I'm interested to see how the wrestling goes between them. Dodson's got way more power on the feet. I think if there's going to be a finish here, it's probably going to be Dodson on the feet. I think Mighty Mouse is just really complete, and the only thing that he kind of lacks is that physical power and punching power.
The punching power. He's got plenty of muscle power for takedowns and ground control.
I want to say Dodson's way beefier. I mean, he's a wide body, so I just don't see him out-muscling Dodson, but I do see him setting up his takedowns and being quick and explosive enough to put Dodson on his back. So I'm leaning Mighty Mouse right now.
Huh. Well, I'm going with Dodson, maybe more out of hope than out of wisdom, because I think Dodson's a fighter that goes for the finish. I think he's very exciting. I do think you do have a point. He might have slowed down a step or two since he cut down from bantamweight, and Johnson has not. Johnson is just as fast, if not faster, at flyweight than he was at bantamweight. However, Dodson's got the ability to get the finish with that power, and Johnson is a decision fighter all the way. He's a point fighter on the feet. He's a control fighter as a grappler, and I just think that's tedious and awful. And I'm ready for John Dodson to knock him out and to take the division into a more entertaining direction. I just hate to see the little guys, have so many disadvantages already with the fans, and I just hate to see Mighty Mouse joining a Dominic Cruz and turning it into a point fighting and a positional control sort of division. And so I'm gonna cross my fingers and root for Dodson. I mean, it is harsh, and I admire the hell out of Mighty Mouse's skills. I mean, he's an incredibly skilled athlete. He's a great wrestler. He's a good mixed martial artist. He sets up his takedowns with strikes. He's a very good striker, in and out, pretty good technique, but I never see him go for a finish. He's strictly fighting for points, and I just hate that shit. So I got to go with Dodson.
I don't think he has it in him. He doesn't have punching power, and
no, he doesn't. And but I think he could apply ground and pound more vigorously, and I think he could learn some submissions and I mean, he's got submissions on his resume, against lower level opponents. But I think it's tougher at the UFC level, especially at the high levels where these guys are, to get those submissions. But I'd just like to see him take more chances and fight for the finish, or fight for a definitive domination at least, rather than just for point fighting.
That I definitely wouldn't label him a point fighter, nor would I label Dominic a point fighter. But everything you're saying, sure, I would like to see him get more finishes or at least pursue them a little more. But yeah, I don't know if he, like you said, his submission game is really tight, but the guys he's fighting are not easy to submit. So I don't know if he just gives up and goes, prioritizes control over trying to get that finish. But it's still exciting. I don't remember watching a Mighty Mouse fight and being bored at all. You're muted again.
Definitely not. Thank you, Dallas. The wind is blowing. I got my mute button on and off. The sun, the shadow. It's brutal out here in Austin, Texas, at 70 degrees. Trying to shoot these videos.
Oh yeah, that makes it better. Thank you.
Yep.
70 degrees.
Well,
salt
Dallas,
in the wound.
Cuddle up with Chewbacca. Try to stay warm in those cold Michigan nights, and we'll see tonight how your Bellator picks. Last week, of course, you had the infamous Rick Hahn pick over Michael Chandler. I think.
Yeah, you're really just buttering me up today, aren't you? Actually, we should talk about that. I was shocked beyond belief at how badly he dominated. That's an Olympic judoka, and Chandler was ragdolling him. I'll admit that I'm wrong and give Chandler all the respect in the world. That was unbelievable. I was shocked.
Yeah, I think Hahn had to have mistrained for that fight. I mean, he clearly seemed flabbergasted the way Chandler shot in for those double legs so quick, and you'd really think that he would have trained to sprawl early and often. I mean, he's training, in Firas Zahabi's gym. GSP trains there. I'm sure he could have found some wrestlers to work with. I think there was a little bit of overconfidence there on Rick Hahn's part, thinking that his judo would prepare him for a really top-level wrestling attack or something, because he completely looked just... He got tooled. I mean, he got creamed.
I think you're exactly right, because no one's really come close to taking him down before. I mean, he'd be, like I said last time, he'd be in the middle of a kick, and someone would perfectly time and just broadside him, and then they would just bounce right off. And you could see it on his face. When Chandler hit that first takedown, it was kind of like, ooh, damn it, he got me. And then after Chandler kept doing that, I do absolutely think that Hahn went in there thinking he's not going to be able to take me down from this. And I also think what that showed is that Chandler is not just that he's that good, he is improving at an unbelievable rate right now. I mean, that kid is shocking me with his potential. He's going to be for real.
Yeah, sadly, I'm already wanting to see Chandler in the UFC, which, hopefully they can, maybe, I don't know, hopefully. I'm actually hoping Eddie Alvarez goes to the UFC, but I would like to see a rematch between Chandler and Alvarez, although I think Chandler takes that probably 60-70% of the time. Anyway, just wanted to rub salt in that wound before we go on.
It's very thoughtful.
Always a thoughtful guy. But thank you, Dallas. And remember to subscribe to MMA Nation on YouTube if you want to watch these things live. And we'll be posting this at Bloody Elbow. And we'll be back next week with a preview of UFC 156. So, Dallas, better be doing your homework.
Okay.
All right. We'll see everybody.